quiet. Don't make a sound.
That day, due to an emergency at the hospital, I got home around midnight. As I tried to open the front door in the dark, a hand suddenly grabbed my arm and yanked me hard. I instinctively tried to scream, but another hand covered my mouth. I was dragged into the old shed in my backyard. Terrified, I imagined the worst and struggled to make a sound, but the one who had pulled me into the shed was my mother-in-law, Sharon.
Be quiet. Look at that.
I was shocked to hear her voice, but then I noticed a strange smell coming from outside the shed and even doubted my nose. When I peeked outside through a crack in the shed, I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw a shocking scene and heard voices. You saw it too, didn't you? Listen, do exactly as I say. With that, Sharon slowly removed her hand from my mouth. After hearing everything from my mother-in-law, I did as she instructed. I opened the front door and said in a louder voice than usual, "I'm home," but something was definitely off. The air felt heavy, and I had an eerie sense that some malevolent presence was creeping up behind me. My name is Lily. My parents have already passed away, and now I work as a nurse at the local community hospital. I've been working at the same hospital for years since graduating from nursing school, but I've been troubled by the workplace dynamics. At one point, I seriously considered quitting, but it was Sharon who changed my fate. Sharon was a patient admitted to our hospital with pneumonia, and I was assigned to her care. When she was first admitted, her pneumonia was severe, and I feared the worst, but she recovered well and expressed her deep gratitude, saying I was like a god who saved her life. She quickly noticed my tense expression due to work stress and asked, "Are you okay?" Such times made me forget she was a patient, and I would confide in her, seeking her advice. This relationship continued even after Sharon was discharged, and we would find time to enjoy tea together, deepening our bond as I shared stories about my deceased parents. Since I had been working at the same hospital since graduating from nursing school, I had few opportunities to meet men. When I joked with Sharon during tea about not having any marriage prospects in my 30s, she said, "If you don't mind my son," and introduced me to Matt. Matt, also in his 30s, was an ordinary office worker, but after being invited out to dinner, we discovered we shared interests in music and movies, feeling a strong connection. A year into our relationship, Matt proposed, and I accepted his proposal without hesitation. When we decided to get married, Sharon was overjoyed. We transitioned from a nurse-patient relationship to mother-in-law and daughter-in-law through a strange twist of fate. Even after marriage, Matt told me I could continue working, so I remained a nurse. Despite the challenges with workplace relationships, I was accustomed to my job, and I figured it was wise to earn money while I could, knowing I might have to stop working once we had children. However, a significant problem soon struck our family. I got a call from Mom. It seems Dad collapsed at home. When my husband came home from work, his routine was to loosen his tie, grab a can of beer from the fridge, and drink it on the spot. But that day, he mentioned this while opening the can. "Oh no. That's serious." "Yeah, so how about we go check on him tomorrow?" Of course, we should. I was anxious about the situation, but I couldn't understand why Matt was calmly drinking beer even though his father had collapsed. I was also worried about Sharon. I imagined she was probably in shock and needed support, making me want to rush to her side. The next day, when we visited the hospital, Sharon, who was deeply distressed, shared some harsh news. It seems he will have partial paralysis and won't be able to live as he used to even after discharge. As a nurse, I knew how challenging this would be. A tough caregiving journey was ahead. I was concerned whether Sharon could manage caring for her husband alone, but then Matt made a suggestion. "Once Dad is discharged, we'll need to help Mom." Luckily, Lily is a nurse, so she's used to caregiving, right? Sharon hesitated to accept Matt's offer out of consideration for me, but I was eager to help her, so I readily agreed. However, on the drive home, my husband said something unexpected. "Let's move out of our apartment and live at my parents' house. Lily, I want you to take a leave of absence from work and focus on Dad's care. I'll support you in every way." I was taken aback by the idea of moving in with his parents, but considering his father's condition, being close by seemed wise. Okay. Following Matt's suggestion, I took a leave of absence from work, and we moved out of our apartment to live with his parents. Sharon felt apologetic, saying, "You don't have to go to such lengths." But my desire to support her as both a friend and mother-in-law prevailed. And so, our life of living with his parents began. Matt's father was more severely paralyzed than I had anticipated, needing assistance with almost everything. With half his body paralyzed, he couldn't even feed himself, so I had to spoon-feed him. In addition to feeding him, I helped with bathing, dressing, and of course, assisting with the toilet. These tasks were all difficult for Sharon, who was unfamiliar with caregiving, so I ended up doing everything by myself. Despite initially promising to help with everything, Matt didn't assist at all, citing his busy work schedule. Even though I was a nurse, caregiving all day long was exhausting. To make matters worse, Matt would come home late every night and bark orders like, "Make dinner now," or "Get the bath ready." He was never particularly kind, and we often had arguments, but since we started living with his parents, he seemed to be much harsher towards me. "I'm sorry, Lily. I try to talk to Matt, but he just insists that serving one's husband is a wife's duty." After finishing lunch with my father-in-law, Sharon and I would have a brief break and drink tea in the kitchen. She seemed troubled by Matt's behavior and frequently apologized to me. "Sharon, you don't need to apologize. Matt's tired from work. His commute is longer now, too. But for him to act like that. He comes home too late from work. I wonder if something's going on." I thought she might be overthinking it, but Sharon had always genuinely cared for me since we were friends. That's why I still called her Sharon, and despite the tough caregiving situation, she tried her best to help lighten my load. Sharon's presence was a significant support for me, making the difficult caregiving life somewhat bearable. However, despite our best efforts, my father-in-law passed away 6 months later. While I tried to console Sharon, who was devastated, Matt showed no signs of grief over his father's death. He continued to push all the caregiving onto me, gave orders, and came home late from work, making me feel uneasy about his behavior. Although Sharon was gradually regaining her brightness, I felt it was best to stay with her for a while longer. Since Matt didn't make any moves, we continued living at his parents' house, but things took an unexpected turn. One day, a slightly older woman, unfamiliar to me, came to the house. "Oh my, isn't that Kate?" Sharon, who greeted her at the door, exclaimed in surprise. "Mom, I'm sorry for worrying you all this time. I rushed back as soon as I heard about Dad's death. From now on, I'll take care of you." Kate was Matt's sister, who had been out of touch for years, and it was my first time meeting her. She had quit her job due to the mental strain and was now visiting the hospital regularly. "Lily, thank you for everything you've done for the house. Now, you and Matt should find a new place. I'll take care of things here since I'm not working right now." I was grateful to Kate for acknowledging my efforts, but Matt felt suspicious about his sister's sudden return. "She's probably after Dad's inheritance. She didn't even show up at our wedding, and now this? It's obvious. Besides, there's not much of an inheritance anyway. This is a problem." Even if Kate had such intentions, I thought it was inappropriate for Matt to say such things right after his father's death. He insisted on staying at the family home to keep an eye on his sister. As if that wasn't enough, Kate, who initially promised to handle everything, changed her attitude once she learned we were staying and started treating me like a maid. Matt, despite his tensions with Kate, would join her in ordering me around, making the situation worse than before. Amid this hellish life, Sharon's support was my only solace. But then, Sharon said something shocking. "Just do as they say." "What, Sharon?" I felt like I'd been pushed off a cliff. Even Sharon, who had been so kind, started attacking me. I was deeply shaken by her sudden change. In hindsight, Sharon had changed since Kate's return. It seemed that, in the end, Sharon favored her biological daughter. Now, there was no one left to support me. Unable to bear it any longer, I started to consider divorcing Matt. At the same time, I decided to return to my nursing job, wanting to stay away from the house as much as possible. That day, due to an emergency at the hospital, I got home around midnight, surrounded by darkness. I was tired, but relieved that I wouldn't be bossed around at such a late hour, and was about to enter the house. Suddenly, a hand emerged from the darkness, grabbed my hand, and yanked me hard. I instinctively tried to scream, but another hand covered my mouth. I was dragged into the old shed in my backyard. Terrified, I imagined the worst and struggled to make a sound, but then I heard a familiar voice.
Quiet. Don't make a sound.
It was Sharon who had pulled me into the shed. I was shocked to hear her voice, but then I noticed the smell of gasoline coming from outside the shed, doubting my nose. When I looked outside through a crack in the shed, I couldn't believe my eyes. There stood Matt and Kate, holding what appeared to be gasoline cans. Isn't she back yet? I thought I heard footsteps. Once she's gone, the inheritance will be all ours. Were they talking about me? Were they planning to get rid of me? Shocked and terrified, I trembled at the sight and the implications. You saw it too, didn't you? Listen, do exactly as I say. With that, Sharon slowly removed her hand from my mouth. Understood. I calmed down and listened to Sharon's plan. After hearing everything, I opened the front door and, louder than usual, said, "I'm home," but Matt and Kate did not appear. Pretending to know nothing was going to be difficult, but I had to do it. I took a shower as usual and then headed to the fridge. Drinking a cup of tea after a bath was my nightly routine. That night, I tried to pour the tea as usual, but my hands were shaking. Closing my eyes, I wished for things to go well and drank the tea in one gulp. I went to bed and pretended to sleep, but couldn't calm down thinking about what might happen next. About 30 minutes later, I smelled something burning and heard sounds coming from the kitchen area. The smell and the crackling noise were unmistakable signs of fire. As Sharon had predicted, the situation was unfolding, and I swallowed hard and got out of bed.
Oh no! Fire! Mom! We have to get out quickly!
Mom! Let's go quickly. You'll be safe with me. Hearing loud voices, I looked out the window and saw Matt and Kate carrying Sharon out of the house. I left my room and headed to the kitchen, where the fire was spreading rapidly, beyond control. Oddly, I felt calm as I watched the flames. Facing the situation, I found an unexpected calmness within myself. I quietly escaped through a window that led to the backyard, as planned with Sharon, ensuring Matt and Kate wouldn't notice. Outside, the neighbors had gathered, creating a commotion.
Let me go! My wife is still inside! Lily! Matt! It's too late! Going back in is dangerous for you too! I can't abandon my beloved wife! Please, let me go!
In the front of the crowd, Matt was shouting my name, trying to get back into the house while Kate desperately held him back. I couldn't help but laugh at the farce from a distance. It was truly embarrassing to watch such a display. I'm safe. Not wanting to see more of this disgraceful scene, I stepped out from the crowd. What? Lily. How are you here? No. How are you alive? When they saw me, they looked as if they were seeing a ghost. Really, you two are terrible actors. I smirked, and their faces turned pale as they crumpled to the ground. Lily, are you hurt? I'm so glad you're safe. I already called the fire department, so don't worry. Thank you, Sharon. As you can see, I'm not hurt at all. But it seems these two aren't doing so well. It's odd considering they evacuated before me.
Hey! What's going on here?
Matt, flustered, looked back and forth between Sharon and me.
Why is Lily here? This wasn't part of the plan. Kate, you must have messed up.
Matt glared at Kate with sharp eyes.
Wait a minute. Why is this my fault? Wasn't your plan flawed from the start?
Despite the crowd of onlookers, they shamelessly blamed each other and argued.
Stop it. How shameless can you two be?
I was shocked to see Sharon, usually so kind, raise her voice like that for the first time. I knew about your plan beforehand, thanks to Sharon. So I was just pretending to be fooled. What? How did Mom know about our plan? I overheard you two talking about starting a fire to kill Lily for her parents' inheritance. Sharon's confession left them both stunned. I shouldn't have told Matt about Lily's wealthy parents owning a lot of land. Sharon, with tears in her eyes, seemed to regret her actions. Sharon, it's not your fault. It all started when I casually mentioned my late parents during our tea chats. Even so, I feel deeply sorry for Lily. To stop their evil plan, I had to act harshly towards you and keep my distance to investigate their scheme. It's okay. In fact, I'm grateful. It reassured me that you're still the kind Sharon I always knew. I smiled gently at Sharon. Feeling a bit relieved, Sharon wiped her tears and took my hand. It felt like we were back to being close friends rather than just mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, and I was very happy. Matt and Kate, looking like they had swallowed bitter pills, could only sit there in shock, watching us. Soon, the fire truck Sharon had called arrived, and the fire was put out, with no damage to the neighboring houses, though our home was half burned. The crowd dispersed, and we waited in the yard as instructed by the firefighters. Initially, Matt and Kate refused to say anything, but as soon as the investigation into the fire was announced, they confessed everything. They revealed that knowing I always drank tea after my bath, they had planned to put sleeping pills in it, set the house on fire while I was asleep, and make it look like an accident. Sharon, having overheard their plan, had secretly swapped the tea to foil their attempt. Knowing the plan beforehand from Sharon in the shed, I pretended to know nothing and acted as usual, though I was tense while drinking the tea and pretending to sleep. Though I had my doubts, once the fire started and their plan was confirmed, I felt completely disgusted by them and oddly calm.
Damn it. Our plan is ruined. It's all Mom's fault. That's right. With her inheritance, even Mom would have been comfortable.
Watching them berate Sharon, I felt nothing but cold disdain for the foolish siblings. Dad must be crying from his grave. He couldn't stand by and watch his children commit crimes. Try to think about how your father would feel. Sharon, with tears in her eyes, desperately pleaded with the two. Sharon, are you all right? Yes, sorry. I'm ashamed for Lily to see this. I'm fine. And this isn't over yet, I said, and Sharon nodded slowly, pulling a piece of paper from her pocket and thrusting it at Matt. Matt, not only did you cause this incident, but you also cheated on Lily, didn't you? Here's the proof. It was a report from a private investigator that Sharon had hired, detailing Matt's affair. What? No way. You knew about that too. Matt was left speechless, his mouth hanging open. You planned to take all of Lily's inheritance and run away overseas with your lover, didn't you? How do you know that? Did the investigator find out that much? No, I got the address of your lover from the investigator and talked to her directly. I also recorded our conversation. In the face of Sharon's calm recounting of the facts, Matt looked utterly defeated.
Wait a minute. Weren't we supposed to split the inheritance? Were you planning to keep it all for yourself?
Kate angrily confronted Matt.
Shut up. As Lily's husband, it's only natural that I inherit her estate. You have no claim. You jerk. That's not what we agreed. I need that money.
It was ridiculous to watch them argue loudly over my inheritance in the middle of the night, even with firefighters present. When Sharon first told me about their plan in the shed, I was more resigned than shocked. Sharon had sensed something was off with Matt long before overhearing their plot. Matt had been treating me harshly and Sharon had noticed. She also knew that Matt and his late father hadn't gotten along well, and Kate had left home because of him. So, she wasn't surprised that Matt showed little concern when his father collapsed. It all made sense now, how Matt had talked so calmly about his father's collapse while drinking beer. Despite Sharon's suspicions, Matt moving back home to care for his father was unexpected. He had explained during their plotting that his real motive was to curry favor with Sharon to get a larger share of the inheritance when his father died and to eliminate me in the process. A fire in an old house would spread more easily, and with Sharon around, Matt thought he wouldn't be suspected. Living in an apartment, on the other hand, had fire safety measures and it would be more suspicious if we lived alone. Matt's cruel plan explained his increasingly harsh behavior towards me. Though his plan was heartless, I remained calm while listening to Sharon in the shed. Sharon had suspected Matt's affair due to his late nights and hired a private investigator who confirmed it. Matt's late nights were due to his affair, which was farther away than our apartment. Matt's late nights were due to his affair, which was farther away than our apartment. Even after learning all this, I felt no betrayal, just a deep sense of coldness towards Matt. We recorded your conversations and have the bottle of tea with the sleeping pills you intended for Lily in the shed. We will hand everything over to the police. Sharon's usual kindness was replaced by stern authority, making them shrink back in fear. And one more thing. You are no longer my children. They had no retort and could only look down in shame. Matt and Kate were later arrested for arson and attempted murder. The sleeping pills found in the tea were prescribed to Kate by her psychiatrist. Details of Matt's affair also came to light. He had a history of lavish spending on women, using money from his job in accounting. Fearing detection with recent changes in company leadership, Matt had decided to secure my inheritance by conspiring with Kate. During the trial, Matt showed no remorse, saying, "I was planning to enjoy the rest of the money overseas with my lover, but Mom ruined it. I planned to divorce Matt but had something to do first." While our burned house was being rebuilt, I suggested Sharon and I live together in a rented apartment. Sharon repeatedly apologized for Matt and Kate's actions, but I wanted to maintain our relationship as it was. During our time as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, I sold my late parents' land and used the money for the house rebuild, donating the rest to charity. Sharon, tearfully grateful, appreciated my gesture, and I hoped to remain friends with her, even as we became unrelated by law. Sharon, tearfully grateful, appreciated my gesture, and I hoped to remain friends with her, even as we became unrelated by law. In the early afternoon on a weekday, feeling unwell, I brought my daughter back home and noticed something odd upon arrival. There shouldn't have been anyone at home, yet my husband's car was parked outside for some reason. Didn't Dad say he was gonna drive to the ceremony? That day, my husband was supposed to have left early in the morning to attend a relative's wedding by car. Feeling my heartbeat quicken, I said, "Let's just go inside for now," and quietly entered the house. Then, from the bedroom on the second floor, I could hear some noises. With a sinking feeling, I approached the bedroom. The bedroom door was slightly open, allowing me to sneak a peek inside, even though it was dim. When I stealthily looked inside, I was met with an unbelievable scene. What? I couldn't help but let out a sound. My daughter also peeks inside from behind me, and then, with a eek, she closes her eyes and steps back. In the bed was my husband. And a familiar woman. The figure of my mother-in-law, my husband's mother. Yes, what was unfolding before me and my daughter was the scene of their infidelity. My husband, who had always been kind to both me and my daughter. The mother-in-law who was easy to talk to and helped with raising our child. Beautiful memories shatter loudly, like fragile glass breaking into pieces.
What? This is disgusting. Absolutely not, horrible. Mom, over here.
My daughter quietly tugged at my hand, urging me to step back from the scene. Tears were welling up in her eyes, seemingly about to cry at the worst sight imaginable. I too was stunned, my mind going blank, unable to move. But how could I forgive these two for such betrayal? I decided to contact someone. My name is Samantha, 45 years old. I live with Ken, who is 5 years younger than me, and our daughter, Madison, a freshman in college. Ken and I met through a friend, and it didn't take long for us to start dating. After about a year, we began living together. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and soon, Ken proposed to me at a restaurant with a beautiful night view, and we decided to get married. The first time I met Ken's parents during the marriage introduction, I thought they seemed very classy and kind. However, what caught my attention was how young Ken's mother, Minnie, appeared. She looked incredibly youthful and beautiful, not matching her age. I married Ken when I was about 25. Usually, parents around this time are about 50 years old. But no matter how you looked at it, Ken's mom didn't seem to be around 50. She was slim and very beautiful. Seeing my confusion, Ken explained from behind, "My parents remarried when I was in middle school. My dad was 49, and my stepmom was 37 then. It was one of those age gap marriages." That made sense to me. When Dad brought Mom home saying he wanted to remarry when I was in 5th grade, I was shocked by her youth and had a mixed feelings. Yeah, it would be surprising to have such a beautiful person as your new mom. Well, but Dad seemed happy, so I was happy too, and now I'm glad she became part of the family, he said with a gentle smile. I had never heard much about Ken's past, so getting to know more about him as we were getting married felt good. Minnie was easy to talk to, perhaps because of her youth. "Did Ken propose properly?" she asked with a grin.
Yes, at a fancy restaurant with a beautiful night view. Wow, that's lovely. And? What do you like about Ken? Well, I guess it's his kindness. Also, he notices little things like if I change my makeup.
Minnie was so easy to talk to that I found myself gushing without realizing. "Ah, Ken's got good points, huh?" Minnie said, nudging Ken with her elbow. "Come on, Mom, stop it." "That's embarrassing," Ken said, blushing but looking pleased. Though not related by blood, it was clear the in-laws really got along well. When my husband introduced me to his in-laws, he said this: "When Dad first brought Mom over, I was going through puberty, so it was a bit complicated. But more than that, I was happy. I had been lonely since I was a child, without siblings or a mother. But when Mom became part of the family, our home felt brighter. I realized then that you don't have to be blood related to be a real family. That's why I want to build a happy and close family with Samantha, just like Dad and Mom. I want us to become a true family." My husband said that and held my hand. Ken. I felt as if I saw his commitment to our marriage. He had overcome loneliness with his family. I resolved in my heart to cherish Ken and to become a family like his parents. When I introduced Ken to my parents, they quickly became friendly thanks to his inherent brightness. My parents warmly accepted him, and we were blessed by many relatives and friends at our wedding. Soon after, we were blessed with a child. "Really? I'm gonna be a dad?" Ken was surprised, but beamed with joy at the news of my pregnancy. The in-laws felt the same, truly celebrating my pregnancy. After a while, we found out the sex of the baby, and learned that it was a girl. "A girl, huh? I'm gonna be worried all the time." "Ken, you're likely to be super protective. Man, if she ever brings home a boyfriend, I might just die of loneliness." "If you say that, she might end up hating you." Even before she was born, we would laugh together. Those times were truly happy. Since getting pregnant, he has been working even harder at his job and has been more proactive than ever in helping around the house. "Sorry for making you cook dinner after just getting back from work." When my morning sickness was bad, he would even cook after coming home late from work. He says, "What are you talking about? Men can only stand by and watch, so let me at least do this." He also took care of me by bringing a blanket when he thought I might be cold, saying, "Hey, don't chill yourself," and insisting on carrying heavy items. "Give me that bag, I'll carry it." Even when I said, "I'm fine," he would insist, "No, give it here," and always took the initiative to help me. Thanks to my husband, both the baby and I were doing well. One day, I got a call from my mother. "Aren't you planning on coming home for the birth?" I hadn't really thought about it. "It's your first birth, so there must be a lot of worries, right? You can come home for a while if you want." "Really? Is that okay?"
Of course. You should lean on us at times like this.
Grateful for my mother's kind words, I thanked her and replied, "Thank you. I'll talk to Ken about it." Nowadays, about half of all expectant mothers go back to their parental home before and after giving birth. Honestly, there were many things I didn't know and was anxious about with this being my first birth, so my mother's suggestion was very welcome.
I'll discuss it with Ken.
After hanging up with my mom and waiting a bit, I brought it up with Ken when he returned from work. My mom called today and asked if I'm considering going back home to give birth. I'm all for it. What do you want to do, Samantha? Well, to be honest, it would be reassuring to have my mom, who has experience in child rearing, around. Yeah, that sounds good. My company doesn't offer paternity leave, and it would be a relief for me too if there's someone reliable near you in case something happens. If you want to go back home, I support it.
Thank you. Then it's decided.
Ken respected my wishes and was supportive of me going back home. And so, I was able to welcome the birthday without any problems. I named my daughter Madison, hoping she would grow up to value the connections between people and to be kind and considerate. After giving birth, I went back to my parents' house and spent some time there with my parents and daughter. The house will be left empty for a while, but considering my husband is good at household chores, I doubt I'll come back to find the house in a mess after being away for some time. He could manage to cook simple meals by himself, so I didn't have to worry about his brief stint living alone. On weekends, the three of us, Madison, Ken, and I, would live together. I can change diapers now, I've practiced, he'd say, managing it perfectly as if he'd been practicing at home. Seeing him taking care of me and Madison even when I was not around made me smile naturally. Every day I felt grateful for having married such a wonderful person, both as a husband and as a father. When I returned home after the birth, the house was not at all messy and was kept in a clean state, just as I expected. Moreover, there was a new baby crib that I had wanted, along with a lot of diapers, toys, and clothes for the baby.
What's all this? Did you buy all this?
Heh, pretty good, right? Actually, my dad and mom bought these as a gift for the baby.
Really? That's so kind. I'll send them a thank you message later. Oh, do that. Mom even said cooking might be hard for you after work, so she cooked and brought over a bunch of frozen meals. She's really a worrier, isn't she?
It seems that my mother-in-law had visited several times while I was away.
She is amazing. I have a lot to learn from her. It's just that my mom is too incredible.
He was laughing in amazement. Ken has always been one to heap praise on his mother. From the outside, one might think he's a bit of a mama's boy, as he often talks about his mother. He would say things like, for her age, Mom is really beautiful, or the meals Mom makes are out of this world, and at the beginning of our marriage, it bothered me a bit, but he never said I should be like his mother. Above all, Ken is very kind to me, calling me cute and praising my cooking as the best. So, I tried not to dwell on it too much. Thanks to my in-laws and husband, both my daughter and I were able to live comfortably and happily every day. Eventually, my maternity leave ended, and it was time for me to return to work for the first time in a while, leaving my daughter at preschool. However, a week before returning, my boss informed me, "Samantha, I'm sorry, but you've been transferred to a different department starting next week." During my maternity leave, it seems they were short-staffed and hired someone new. I had been told before going on maternity leave that returning to the same department is not guaranteed, so I understand that it can't be helped. Honestly, I'm quite anxious, but living on just Ken's salary is not enough, so becoming a stay-at-home mom is not an option. I'm feeling down, but I have to psyche myself up and give it my all. Then came the first day back. The facilities and atmosphere had changed since I was last at work, and I found myself bewildered. Above all, having been transferred to a different department after such a long break, the work was completely different, and I was struggling just to keep up with everyone every day. I felt deeply how challenging it is to juggle childcare and work. I wonder if I can really manage both work and childcare from now on. As these days continued, I found myself expressing my concerns to Ken. He seemed a bit surprised since I usually don't make such downhearted remarks. It's okay. You're just confused because of the new job and unfamiliar childcare. It'll settle down eventually. Cheer up, he said while patting my head, but I remained downcast. Then Ken suggested, what if we ask my mom for help with childcare? Your mom? Yeah, my mom. She's never raised children and really wants to be more involved with the baby. Is that so?
Yes. She'd be thrilled to spend time with the baby, and it might help you relax a bit, right? Just knowing someone nearby is willing to help can make a big difference. What do you think?
If Minnie is really willing to help, it would be more than I could ask for. Is it really okay to rely on her so much? It's fine. In fact, she'll be happy. Saying this, Ken took out his smartphone and stepped out of the living room. After a while, he came back and gave me a peace sign, indicating she's happy to help. It seems he had already discussed it with Minnie. From then on, Minnie started to visit our house more frequently and, being a stay-at-home mom herself, actively helped with childcare. Some days, I'd come home from work to find that Minnie had cooked dinner or had picked up Madison from preschool. She also said, Ken and I can watch Madison, so feel free to go back to your parents' house and relax without the child occasionally, and she and Ken's dad would sometimes take Madison out, really spoiling us. With Minnie's full support, we somehow managed to raise our daughter. Time flew by, and Madison turned 17. Becoming a lawyer has been Madison's dream since she was young. To achieve her dream, her goal seems to be attending a prestigious university, and she has been very busy lately with tutoring and extra classes. During this time, we received a wedding invitation from father-in-law's sister's granddaughter, Emily. Emily, huh? It's been a while. Have you met her, Samantha? I met her briefly when we went to your parents' house for Christmas. Right, not much acquaintance there. The whole family is invited, but do you think we can attend that day? I'm fine. I can take a day off work. But I wonder about Madison. Well, it's a crucial time for her. Yeah. Then, maybe I should go alone this time. It's a shame after they invited all of us, but is that okay? It's fine. Everyone will understand. We can't leave Madison at home alone. You're right, thank you. How are you getting to the venue? The wedding venue for Emily seems to be a stylish place with a forest atmosphere, judging from the photos on the invitation. It's a lovely place, but it seems a bit hard to reach by train. Well, I won't be able to drink, but maybe I should drive. That seems like the best idea. Be careful. With my husband's suggestion, prioritizing our daughter, Madison and I will be absent, and only Ken will attend Emily's wedding. On the day of the wedding, Ken was dressed in his suit, his hair perfectly styled.
Wow, Dad, looking sharp. Make sure to send photos from the wedding, okay?
Heh, right? Oh, I'll send them. Keep up with your studies, Madison. Take care. With that, my husband headed off to the wedding venue. A while later, after sending Madison off to school, I went to work. I thought it was going to be just another regular day, but around lunchtime, I got a call from the school saying, Madison seems to be feeling very unwell. Worried it might be the flu going around, I left work early in a panic to pick her up. I arrived at the school, put her in the car, and we headed straight to the hospital for a checkup, and fortunately, it wasn't the flu but likely just fatigue from the change of seasons. Both she and I were relieved, and I bought some easy-to-eat porridge and jelly for her before heading home. Once home, I noticed something odd. Ken's car, which shouldn't have been there, was parked in the driveway. Huh? Why is his car here? He was supposed to go by car, wasn't he? And I had seen him off this morning as he got into the car. Could he have forgotten something? But we checked last night that he had the wedding gift in his bag. What else could be so important that he had to come back for? Madison also noticed the car and asked, Huh? Didn't Dad go by car today? Is he home? Tilting her head. Trying not to let my turmoil show, I replied, maybe he ended up taking the train after all. While we both found it strange, we cautiously opened the front door. As we entered, my heart skipped a beat in dread. Lined up next to Ken's shoes were a pair of women's shoes that I had never seen before. It was clear they weren't mine. A terrible suspicion began to swell inside me, and I could feel my heart racing faster than usual. What? Why? Is someone here? Why? We looked at each other. No, it can't be. Madison seemed to share my dread, and we stood there, stunned. Let's go in slowly. Though puzzled, Madison followed my lead, careful to make no noise. And so, we quietly entered the house. Even as we stepped into the living room, there was no sign of anyone. See, Dad's not here after all. I'm going back to my room. When my daughter was about to go back to her room, I called out, wait a minute, want to go up together? I was unable to shake off the uneasy feeling despite her wanting to go up alone. Thus, we went upstairs together. But halfway up, we noticed something amiss. Isn't the light in Mom and Dad's bedroom on? I was sure I had turned off all the lights before heading out this morning. I thought I turned it off. Wait, Mom, do you hear that? Indeed, there was a faint sound, barely audible. It seemed to be coming from our bedroom. I walked ahead, filled with dread, and approached the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, allowing us to glimpse inside the dimly lit room. Peering in stealthily, we were confronted with an unbelievable scene. What? I couldn't help but let out a sound. My daughter, peeking from behind me, screamed, no. Inside, there were my mother-in-law and husband who should have been attending Emily's wedding. Furthermore, anyone could see they were blatantly engaged in an affair, completely naked. Witnessing such a scene, my daughter said ugh and, covering her mouth, started to retch as she backed away.
Why? It's so gross, I can't handle this. This is horrible. Mom, over here.
In a whisper, Madison tried to pull me away from the spot. Tears filled her eyes, about to cry at the horrible sight. I was in the same state. My mind went blank, and I stood there, dazed, unable to move. Madison repeatedly tugged at my hand, calling out, Mom. How could I have not noticed before? My always kind husband. The husband who perfectly managed household chores and childcare. My beloved husband. As both Madison's father and my spouse, I believed he was the ideal man without a doubt. Madison felt the same way. She respected her gentle father. Today, she even complimented him, saying, you look cool, as we saw him off together. I regret exposing my daughter to such a horrendous scene. Both Madison and I loved my husband and Minnie. Yet, in an instant, our happiness crumbled. Since the beginning of our marriage, my husband always looked at Minnie with kind eyes. He would frequently invite her over, and she was even visiting our home during my pregnancy. He also excessively praised her. It would be a lie to say I never found it strange. But I believed there was a genuine parent-child love between them, even if they weren't biologically related. I trusted them. But the love between my husband and Minnie was not of a normal parent and child, but as lovers. As I was standing dazed in my daughter's room, she said, Mom, we can't just stand by. We need to take action. I have an idea, and she went back towards the bedroom. Then she pulled out her smartphone and started recording a video of the two, caught in the act.
What are you doing filming that?
I tried to stop her in a panic, but Madison insisted, we have to. We need solid evidence so those two can't deny anything, and continued filming. She seemed disgusted, closing her eyes to avoid the sight but kept recording to gather evidence. Madison, are you okay? I was concerned about her since she was feeling unwell earlier, but she said, I'm fine now, the adrenaline is kicking in. The evidence comes first, seemingly forgetting her ailment. Despite Madison and I whispering among ourselves, the two of them didn't notice at all. They must be so engrossed in each other that they've become oblivious to their surroundings. After a while of capturing evidence, Madison and I began to calm down somewhat. How should we confront them? Just then, from the bedroom, I heard my husband suggestively saying, "Mama, let's take a bath together."
Madison, they're coming out of the bedroom. This is bad.
Madison and I quickly hid in her room. Ew, he's calling her mama? Gross, Madison muttered under her breath. What should we do in this situation? Should we confront my husband and Minnie with the video evidence, threatening to expose them? No, emotions would likely get in the way, and we wouldn't be able to have a rational discussion. Besides, Madison and I alone might not be able to stand up to them. Then, I had a plan. As soon as Minnie and my husband entered the bathroom, I threw all their clothes into the trash can. About 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Come in, I beckoned the guests into the living room. Hearing the commotion outside, my husband and Minnie came out of the bathroom, opening the door to the changing area.
Why are you?
Our home's layout has the bathroom adjacent to the living room, separated by a door. In the living room, next to it, were Madison, me, and the father-in-law, along with other relatives all gathered. My husband panicked, trying to cover himself. What's going on? Why are you dressed like that? Seeing my smiling face, my husband was startled. Oh, the wedding ended early, so I was taking a bath, but I forgot to bring a change of clothes. Despite not attending the wedding, you had the nerve to lie about it right in front of those who are there, and it was a lie that got found out almost immediately. Oh, Ken. You weren't at the wedding, were ya? No, Sure enough, my husband got called out by his father and stumbled over his words. Your mother is inside too, right? Can you tell her to come out before she catches a cold? I pointed out, and he stumbled again. My mom is, well. Seeing Ken unable to answer anything, his father snapped.
Hey! You, come out too!
Saying this, he pushed Ken and went into the changing room, pulling out his mother by the hand.
No!
Eventually, dragged out forcibly by his father, my mother-in-law also appeared in front of all the relatives, covering her private parts just like Ken. Dad, Grandma, it's gross, so get dressed quickly. My daughter said calmly and threw clothes at them. For a while, the two who had been hiding in the changing room, shivering with lips blue from cold, hurried to put their clothes on. Once dressed, my father-in-law spoke up.
Can you explain to me why the two of you were in there together?
He questioned my husband and my mother-in-law, his face turning red as if it were about to burst into flames. I was feeling unwell, and Ken was just helping me. My mother-in-law started with an excuse that made no sense.
And how do you explain this?
With those words from my father-in-law, all the relatives started to play a video showing Ken and my mother-in-law together. How did you? What is this? When did this happen? Their faces turned pale instantly. In fact, after recording my husband and mother-in-law, I had sent the video to my father-in-law on his way back from the wedding, with a message saying, "Here's the proof." It seems that after seeing the video, my father-in-law shared it with the relatives he was with, telling them, "Check this out." Thus, like a family gathering, everyone ended up at our house. Normally, my father-in-law is a calm person and doesn't involve others, but he couldn't remain calm after they skipped a family wedding and committed such betrayal.
Can you still say you didn't betray us, that you don't know anything about this?
Such harsh words, unlike my usually gentle father-in-law, filled the house. Following my father-in-law, other relatives also started hurling insults like, "You have a daughter and yet you do this, unbelievable as a parent, disgusting." And then I said to Ken, "Let's get a divorce." The divorce was already agreed upon by our daughter. After seeing something so disgusting, "I can't stay with Dad and Grandma, they're just too gross," she agreed vehemently with me. Even my father-in-law said, "Minnie, let's get a divorce." And Ken, from today onwards, we're no longer father and son. Well, seeing something like that, it's understandable. The word divorce coming from both me and my father-in-law clearly shook my husband and mother-in-law, who, not knowing what else to do, suddenly knelt down.
I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I won't do it again. Please, forgive me. Please.
No matter how much they begged on their knees, our anger wasn't going to subside. I just said, "Get out of this house right now." They kept apologizing, but I refused to listen. In the end, my father-in-law grabbed Ken and my mother-in-law by the hands and said, "Think about Madison. Just leave, now," and threw them out. And then, as if following suit, the relatives dispersed. "Samantha, let's talk again sometime," my father-in-law said as he too left the house. Overwhelmed by everything that had happened, my daughter and I just sat down on the floor, exhausted. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm here for you," she said, patting my shoulder. But despite her brave front, tears were streaming down her face. "Madison, I'm okay because I have you. And you have me, Madison. From now on, it's just the two of us," I told her. I felt pathetic for always being the one supported by my daughter, but I resolved to make sure she would not feel lonely from now on. And a few days later, our divorce was finalized. At the same time, my father-in-law and mother-in-law also finalized their divorce. Ken kept apologizing and asking for forgiveness, but I consistently said impossible, and he seemed to have finally given up. With the help of a lawyer, I received alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law. The video my daughter had suggested turned out to be really useful. It seems my father-in-law also received alimony from Ken and my ex-mother-in-law, but he wanted me to have all of it. "This is yours, not mine. I've already received mine." "No, please, take it." I failed as a father and as Minnie's husband. I believe I also had a part in this situation. "At least let me do this much for Madison and you," he insisted. Out of respect for his wishes, I accepted it and used it for my daughter's education. Honestly, the thought of financing my daughter's law school by myself was daunting, so I'm truly grateful to my father-in-law. And now, 10 years have passed. Madison has fulfilled her dream and become a lawyer. She's still new to the field but wants to use her knowledge to help those in need. She will face many challenges. But knowing Madison and her strong heart, she's bound to successfully overcome them and become a respectable lawyer. Since the incident, my ex-mother-in-law has been living alone in a shabby apartment. Having been a homemaker for many years, she had no job prospects and ended up working part-time at a grocery store. I don't know if she's managing well, but she must be struggling. As for Ken, it seems his relationship with his stepmom is truly over. After our respective divorces, they hardly met anymore. Perhaps they were only enjoying the thrill of the affair. As for my ex-husband, he has been completely ostracized by my father-in-law and treated like an outcast by the relatives since that day. Moreover, his company never paid well. After paying alimony to my father-in-law and me, he must be living a tight life. He did care deeply for Madison, but she told him, "I never want to see your face again," leaving him in tears. Since then, Madison and my ex-husband have not seen each other. Well, he got what he deserved. My father-in-law and I still keep in touch occasionally. He is also supportive of Madison's future. As for me, since my daughter has now become a working adult, my parenting has taken a back seat. Lately, my hobby has been traveling with my high school friend, Susan, who, just like me, got divorced after her husband had an affair and is now single. We're getting older and I'm done with love, but creating new memories with friends, my daughter, and my father-in-law is something I look forward to.
This cheating wife! How dare you lie about this child being my grandchild? This is not my grandchild at all.
Originally, the daughter, who did not resemble my husband, became even more unlike him as she turned 3. The mother-in-law found this strange and seems to have secretly conducted a DNA test between husband and my daughter. She showed me the results with a triumphant look on her face.
Now I can formally kick you out. Not only did you fail to produce a male heir, but you also tried to pass off a child from another man as our grandchild. You good for nothing. Get out.
While listening to my mother-in-law's passionate speech, I was confused, tilting my head. Let's calm down, Mom. After all, this child isn't my daughter, you know. I showed her the evidence that proved it. Then, she trembled. I thought she would admit her fault at this point, but she twisted the story to her convenience. My dream has always been to become a mother surrounded by many children. When I was about elementary school age, there were other kids who wanted to be mothers, but as we went on to middle and high school, those dreams turned to careers or extended hobbies. Yet, my dream remained to have a family surrounded by lots of children. You like kids so much, why not become a kindergarten teacher, a college friend once suggested. Nowadays, it seems like women are the only ones drawing the short straw by getting married, having children, and entering into domestic life. Going through college, job hunting to get a good job, and building a career, but it all seems wasted if you get married and pregnant. While accepting the opinions of those around me, my desire to have and raise children was stronger than my desire for a career. By my junior year of college, I was desperately job hunting and graduated with a job offer from a decent company. Once employed, I realized how naive I had been during my student days, facing the harsh realities of the working world every day. 3 years into my job, a personnel change took me to a different branch where I met my husband. He was like a mentor to me, spending a lot of time working together. From there, our relationship gradually became more personal. The common ground was our love for children. My husband was considered handsome by general standards, attracting the attention of young female employees at the branch. However, no one made a move because they all assumed a guy that handsome must have a girlfriend. That misconception prevented anyone from approaching him. Eventually, it became known that we were dating, and quite a few female employees lamented, "If only I had known he was available, I would have made a move." After a relationship of about 2 years, we began to think about marriage. I'm also in my late 20s, wanting at least 3 kids. Therefore, I thought marriage was now or never, and things moved swiftly from there. My husband and I wanted children and underwent tests for hereditary diseases. In fact, I have a much younger brother who inherited our father's allergies. It's just a predisposition to allergies, so he ended up with different ones from our dad, and had a hard time as a child. I was tested for allergies too, but, despite having the same father, I didn't inherit them. Having seen my brother struggle, I didn't want our children to go through the same. However, the results were unexpected. Neither my husband nor I had hereditary allergies, but it turned out my husband was infertile. Being perfectly healthy and capable of having children myself, I was honestly devastated when I found out I couldn't have children with my husband. It would have been easier to accept if the roles were reversed. My husband felt guilty, saying I should leave him as he couldn't fulfill my dream of having a family. But I'm not of the age to be chasing dreams. Dreams are dreams, reality is reality. I chose a life with my husband over a family with children. He's the only one for me in this world, and I couldn't see a future with anyone else but him. So, we got married, set up a new home, and started our new life together. My father-in-law was kind and was happy to finally have a daughter, as he had always wanted one. However, my mother-in-law was not so welcoming. I was prepared for some conflict with her, but I realized I had underestimated the situation. She would come to our new home when my husband was away and start saying how she wanted to see her grandchildren. From wanting to see her grandchildren, she moved on to berating me for not producing an heir, saying, "What kind of daughter-in-law are you if you can't bear children?" She would even nitpick on my housekeeping, finding fault where there was none, just because I was not pregnant. To top it off, she blamed my inadequacy as a wife on the ridiculous idea of women advancing in society, and even told me to write my resignation. The stress turned into fear of my mother-in-law. My heart rate would soar, and I'd start hyperventilating. I opened up to my husband about everything, but I couldn't properly explain myself because just remembering what she said and did made me tremble. My husband didn't take it as seriously. It's okay to say that we should keep our distance or not come over when my husband is not around. However, when my husband found out that I was being asked to show my grandchild's face, he started saying he didn't want it known that he was infertile because it's annoying to have people come over to him too. I think it would all settle down if he just told them that. Generally, my husband is a very kind and good man. He might still feel a sense of guilt for not being able to give me the children he loves. Raised by such a mother-in-law, he might have been brought up with the belief that only by having a son can one properly carry on the family legacy. I've heard that his father's side of the family comes from a line of wealthy people. Thinking about the heavy responsibility he carries and the pain of not being able to fulfill it, I couldn't bring myself to push back any harder. Reluctantly, I kept my distance from my mother-in-law as much as possible and avoided seeing her when my husband was not around. During this time, I developed a patch of alopecia about the size of a dime, but then my husband's transfer was confirmed. By marrying my husband, I had been moved to a different department. He said I don't need to follow him to the ends of the earth, but staying in that house meant continuing my relationship with my mother-in-law. I couldn't bear that, so I resigned and decided to follow my husband on his transfer. The place we moved to still had a lot of undeveloped land, and the people were generous and easy to get along with. Best of all, we were quite far from my in-laws, so there was no way my mother-in-law would come just to nag at me. That alone reduced my stress, and my alopecia improved. The air and food were delicious, and I felt like I had gained a bit of weight, but I felt very fulfilled living my own life. Once I got used to the new environment, I started a new job. It was only part-time since I didn't have any qualifications, but working in after-school care felt like a calling for me, someone who had longed for children but couldn't have them. In fact, I had acquired a childcare qualification in college. It's not to become a childcare worker, but because I thought it would be useful for parenting. It seems that qualifications are not required to work in after-school care, but the program in my area was very well organized, and the treatment differed depending on whether you had qualifications. Once they found out I had a childcare qualification, they said I was eligible to take a special certification for after-school care, so they suggested I try for it. After discussing it with my husband, who thought it was a good idea and supported my newfound sense of purpose, I went ahead. After attending courses and such, a little over a year had passed. The area where we live has very comprehensive child welfare services. There are various supports available, and we were able to welcome a new baby girl into our family. My husband was overjoyed, calling it a miracle. I also think that if I hadn't been doing this job, I wouldn't have had this encounter. Perhaps God gave us these trials so we could meet our daughter. My husband immediately reported to his parents. Seeing my husband talk with such high spirits and apparent joy, I think I might have seen him like this for the first time. However, at this time, either due to my husband's poor explanation or my mother-in-law's lack of understanding, the situation took a dreadful turn. When our daughter turned 2 years old, my husband was transferred again, and we had to move back to the region where his parents lived. My husband got promoted and returned to the branch he was previously at. My in-laws were eager to see our daughter, and we started visiting them more frequently. With my husband's promotion, he had more subordinates and wasn't away from home as much, so there was always someone at the in-laws' house, and I thought my mother-in-law's bullying wouldn't be an issue. The long-awaited granddaughter was cherished greatly by my mother-in-law. However, her happiness did not last long.
When are we getting a male heir? Don't act all high and mighty just because you've given birth to one grandchild.
I don't remember doing anything to upset my mother-in-law. But it seems I'm still an unwelcome presence to her.
What's with keeping the pregnancy a secret and only announcing the birth? Was there something shameful?
Normally, you'd announce a pregnancy first, right? She berated me as an unreasonable daughter-in-law. This was supposed to have been explained by my husband. I took it that she knew yet chose to say it on purpose. Gradually, my mother-in-law's complaints extended to my daughter.
They say a daughter takes after her father, but my granddaughter doesn't resemble my son at all.
It's natural they don't look alike, but she started saying it on purpose. Not only did she tell me this, but when my daughter tried to approach her with grandma, she would say, "Don't come over here with your dirty hands," pushing her away as if she were something filthy. Even during meals at the in-laws, if my daughter didn't eat neatly and spilled her food, she was scolded for not having good manners and had the back of her hand slapped repeatedly. "I'm sorry, I'll make sure to discipline her properly later, please forgive her." When I defended my daughter, my mother-in-law would hit my head several times, saying that's why she's spoiled. By the way, if my father-in-law or husband were there, she wouldn't dare to behave so horribly towards me or my daughter. My daughter started saying "Grandma," scary, and grew distant from my mother-in-law. Then, she started calling my daughter a charmless grandchild. My father-in-law, as always, was very fond of her, and my daughter grew very attached to him. Every time we visited the in-laws, my mother-in-law would nag about whether there were signs of pregnancy yet, urging me to quickly produce a male heir. As I didn't get pregnant, she started suggesting potential brides to my husband.
How about this girl? She looks like she could have easy births and many children. This type seems more likely to have boys.
My husband was called to his parents' house alone, and every time he came back, he would say that's what his mother had suggested. At first, it seemed like some kind of joke, and I thought I was just ignoring it. But after being told the same thing over and over, my husband came to me wondering, could there be a misunderstanding? Taking that into consideration, I confess that since we've been back, my mother-in-law has been annoyingly insistent about me having a boy. Moreover, she has been very cold because our daughter doesn't look like her father, and what she calls discipline is more like corporal punishment. I also told him that our daughter is scared of her grandmother. After all, my mother-in-law's attitude hasn't changed since we got married. In fact, I feel like it's gotten worse. Her treatment of my daughter, especially, is so blatant that it's chilling to think what she might have done when I'm not around. My husband seems to have realized just how painful it was to be constantly nagged by his mother to have a son. He apologized for saying we should just keep our distance, admitting he was wrong and asking for my forgiveness, though belatedly. There are pains you can't understand until you experience them. I told him it's okay. And we discussed what we should do next. As a result, my daughter and I decided to avoid going to my in-laws as much as possible and not to meet my mother-in-law face-to-face. Instead, my husband continued to make appearances at his parents' house whenever called by my mother-in-law. While it's an unbearable humiliation, he initially didn't think of divorcing me and mentioned waiting for the right moment to clarify things. But every time, he came back saying there wasn't a good time today. I knew he had no intention of divorcing and remarrying, and I thought it was better for him to handle my mother-in-law than for me to take action. So, I wasn't worried about him visiting his parents every time he was called, but unexpectedly, things turned in my mother-in-law's favor. Until now, the candidates for remarriage she introduced were only shown to him in photos. But this time, she went so far as to introduce a woman directly to him. Unintentionally, the woman fell in love with him at first sight. He is still handsome, and even if he doesn't like someone, he maintains basic politeness. What was just social politeness for him seemed to be taken seriously by her. I don't think he would say something he doesn't mean, but there's a chance my mother-in-law twisted his words to the woman. With her plan working perfectly, my mother-in-law's actions intensified. This happened when my daughter turned 3. Originally, my father-in-law had contacted us wanting to celebrate my daughter's birthday. But since my husband and I were not keen on having it at my in-laws, we asked to wait a bit longer so we could organize it on another day. My husband prepared for the granddaughter's birthday party. "You're off today, right? Come over with her." Impatient, perhaps he planned it as a surprise. Reluctant as we were to face my mother-in-law, it seemed unfair to refuse, so we took my daughter to my in-laws. However, when we arrived at my in-laws, my father-in-law was not there. At the house, for some reason, was my mother-in-law along with the woman she had suggested as a potential wife for my husband. I had a DNA test done on my son and granddaughter. They just didn't resemble each other much. I didn't want to doubt, but seeing the results, I thought it was clear. "You've been cheating, haven't you? Passing off a child from another man as our son's. That's enough evidence to demand a divorce, isn't it?" Then, my mother-in-law started urging my husband, "You were being deceived. and that such a frivolous woman was not suitable to be your wife. The woman she had suggested as a bride was chiming in with my mother-in-law, clapping her hands and chanting for divorce. I was honestly astounded. Taking advantage of my silence, my mother-in-law and the candidate kept saying whatever they wanted. It was nothing but noise to me. It wasn't that I couldn't argue back, I was just too appalled to even bother. Gathering my wits, I took out a piece of paper and showed it to my mother-in-law.
Sorry to burst your bubble, but it makes perfect sense that my daughter doesn't look like my husband. Moreover, she's not even my biological child.
What? What I showed to my mother-in-law was a copy of the document proving that we had welcomed our daughter through a special adoption process. It was evidence of the adoption being finalized, and since she wouldn't understand if explained verbally, my husband and I had decided it was quicker to show her the proof, carrying a copy in case a situation like this ever arose. By the way, our daughter doesn't yet know this fact. She might have some suspicions, but we have no intention of hiding it from her. How dare you deceive us? I welcomed her thinking she was my granddaughter, and she turns out to be someone else's child. That's even worse than if you had cheated and had the child. She criticized me for welcoming a child whose biological parents were unknown. Then my husband shouted, "Silence."
I explained everything, right? That we welcomed our daughter through adoption. How did it turn into my wife cheating and having the child? Are you out of your mind?
He lost his temper at my mother-in-law's cruel words. He quickly regained his composure and confessed something he had never told his mother.
The reason we can't have biological children is my fault. I found out before we got married that I'm infertile. So, my wife is not to blame at all.
He showed the copy of the test results from when he had found out. Then he revealed that he had asked me not to tell this fact to his mother. Realizing that the inability to have biological grandchildren was due to her own son, she was lost for words and hung her head. And it became clear that the only one who hadn't known or understood was my mother-in-law herself, leaving her struggling to process everything. In that moment, my husband declared we were cutting ties with her.
No matter the misunderstanding, harassing psychologically and bullying a small child is not something adults do.
My husband accused her, saying she had gone far beyond what could be forgiven. She was disowned by her beloved son, but her reaction was minimal, and she might not even understand what had happened. However, having no further reason to speak with my mother-in-law, we left her place. That night, we received a call from my father-in-law. He asked what had happened in his absence, so we told him everything, and he immediately came over to our house. He apologized to me and my daughter for his wife's rudeness. My daughter seemed not to fully understand, but said, "If Grandpa says it's okay, then it's okay." I couldn't be as forgiving. All I could manage was to say I understood. The many actions and words from my mother-in-law had been like hell for me. A few days later, my mother-in-law, who was supposed to have been disowned by my husband, suddenly barged into our house, yelling. And for some reason, my husband's potential bride was also with her. Clearly, she hadn't understood my husband's declaration of estrangement, as expected.
You must have made my son turn against me, right? My son is kind, he's just pitying you and protecting you.
The potential bride echoed her, screaming like she was in charge of the ruckus.
We are the saviors who have come to rescue our victim's son from the evil clutches of his wife.
My mother-in-law shouted, "See for yourself," and as she raised her hand towards my daughter who had peeked out from the room. My daughter flinched in shock, and I shielded her with my body. But the expected pain did not come. Looking up, I saw my husband had stepped between me and my mother-in-law, protecting us. From another room came a loud voice. My father-in-law, who had been hiding in another room, couldn't hold back any longer and burst out.
What did your granddaughter ever do to you? Accept reality for once.
He was standing in front of my mother-in-law to protect me and my daughter. My mother-in-law, not expecting my father-in-law to be there, was taken aback, opening and closing her mouth in surprise. In fact, my father-in-law had been suspicious of the actions of my mother-in-law and the potential bride during his absence and had been keeping an eye on them. He had sensed they were up to no good and informed us. So, today's attack was expected. The only unexpected part was that my daughter, who had been told to stay in her room no matter what, was startled by my mother-in-law's voice and revealed herself. When my father-in-law sensed something was amiss, he wanted to see what my mother-in-law and the potential bride would do, so he hid in another room in our house. He hadn't planned on showing himself in front of his wife, but he couldn't stand by when she tried to hit my daughter.
Are you all blind? How could a family as united as ours ever fall apart? Wake up to the reality, why don't you?
And to top it all off, my father-in-law told his wife that he was aware of all her secrets and brought back the woman who was a candidate to be my husband's wife. A few days later, my father-in-law contacted me. It was about the secrets of my mother-in-law that he mentioned when he was leaving. According to him, he had sensed that his wife had been acting strangely for a while and probably had something to hide. But since it didn't seem to cause any particular trouble, he overlooked it. He appreciated the fact that she had kept the house running while he was often away for work. However, he couldn't make sense of the sudden appearance of the prospective bride and, after the incident that occurred during his absence, he had conducted an investigation into his wife's behavior through a detective agency. In the process, a malicious plan had come to light. My mother-in-law had been having an affair for years. My father-in-law, suspecting she was hiding something, had never imagined it would be an affair and was somewhat shocked. However, his shock turned to anger the moment he learned the identity of the sudden bride-to-be. The woman my mother-in-law had brought as a candidate for marriage was the daughter of her lover. My mother-in-law had no intention of divorcing my wealthy father-in-law, but she also did not want to leave her lover. She thought that if her lover's daughter married her son, family relations would start, making her affair easier to continue. It was all a plan orchestrated by my mother-in-law. Incidentally, the several candidates for marriage shown only in photos to my husband were women found on a matching site. It appears she had registered under my husband's name without his consent and pretended to be him. Furthermore, the daughter of my mother-in-law's lover, the marriage candidate, did not know her father was having an affair with my mother-in-law. She had met him thinking it was just a normal matchmaking attempt by her father and had fallen for the handsome man. The plan to have their children marry each other was also proposed by my mother-in-law to her lover. My father-in-law could no longer trust his wife's excuses for justifying her affair, nor could he believe that she didn't want a divorce only because of his wealth, and he decided to divorce. He also mentioned that having such an adult around was not good for my daughter's education. My father-in-law was firm in his decision, and it seemed that no matter how much his wife begged and apologized, he would not forgive her. Ever since I got married, my mother-in-law, who was always aggressive towards me, suddenly became meek and sought my help.
My husband adored you and your daughter, right? If you guys persuade him, I think he will reconsider.
She pleaded, wanting me to somehow stop my father-in-law from divorcing her. But after all the torment she put me and my daughter through, I owed her no favors. I am not that kind-hearted, nor am I that capable.
Don't joke with me. My husband, daughter, and I have all been hurt by what you've done. Shouldn't there be something you want to say before asking for favors?
That was truly how I felt, even if she apologized now. But my mother-in-law resorted to betrayal.
Did I do something wrong? Sure, I feel a bit sorry for having an affair while my husband was around, but wasn't the issue with the adoption due to your lack of explanation? I'm not to blame here.
Hearing this, my husband threw her out without a word. Then he vehemently chased her away. My father-in-law had initially given his wife some time to find another place to live, but after hearing her story, he revoked this grace period, submitted the divorce papers immediately, and demanded alimony from both his wife and her lover. The lover's situation also became a disaster as he was confronted by his wife due to the various rumors and the alimony notice he received, causing a huge scandal. My mother-in-law's lover, who was married into a moderately wealthy family through his wife, faced a huge uproar for bringing shame to them. Afterwards, he was demanded a significant amount in alimony and ended up being divorced. As for the prospective bride my mother-in-law had arranged, she continued to push forward with her plans to marry my husband, unaffected by her parents' predicaments. That led us to obtain a restraining order against her after she approached our daughter at the park. My mother-in-law, ousted from the family home upon the divorce, began working to pay off the alimony. The alimony owed to her husband was covered by the division of their assets. But the amount demanded by her lover's wife was far beyond what she could afford from the divorce settlement. She began living alone for the first time in her life, in an old apartment with thin walls where she could hear everything from the neighbors. At work, she's constantly making mistakes and getting scolded. She's turned into the kind of person she used to mock me, calling her useless and slow. For the first time in her life, over half a century, she started living a life filled with misery. Our family has grown even closer through this. My daughter is now always laughing and showing interest in various things. Right now, I'm just so excited to see how she grows. My former father-in-law also regularly checks in on us and has become a wonderful grandfather, absolutely smitten with his granddaughter.